Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon on day 2 of this amazing event. My name is Deborah McCrimmon. I'm Deputy General Counsel at Ripple, and we are here today to talk about scams. But before we jump in, I'd like to give my panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves. So Brittany, why don't we start with you?
Sure. I'm Brittany McClary. I'm the head of Trust and Safety at Gemini. I've been here for about 2.5 years, and prior to that, I was at other startups like Stripe, Directly, Uber, and Thumbtack. And before that, I was in the government for 10 years, most recently at the CIA as a counterterrorism analyst, and prior to that, a Foreign Service officer at the US Department of State.
It's a hard act to follow. Hi, my name is Philip Martin. I'm the Chief Security Officer at Coinbase. I've been at Coinbase just about 8.5 years. Was all throughout Silicon Valley, Palantir, Amazon, a few other smaller startups. And prior to that, I also spent 10 years in the government in the US military focused on counterintelligence and the Middle East.
Okay, if Philip thought it was a hard act to follow Brittany, I feel like it's an even harder act to follow both of them, but I am going to try. So we're here today to talk about scams in crypto. Scams, as probably most people know, are as old as time. They are not unique to any industry. Crypto has not been spared. While about 0.5% of all crypto transactions are illicit transactions, for those victims impacted by that 0.5% of transactions, it's devastating. It can be really life-changing for those individuals. Over the last 2 days, as I've talked to many people in this room, I was telling people what I was doing here. I was going to be moderating this panel. And what was really striking to me is as soon as I said I was going to be moderating a panel about scams, many of you started to tell me a story that had impacted your own lives about scams. I heard stories about people's mothers, people's grandfathers, and people's friends. And so it feels like a really, really important topic for us to talk about here. What I noticed from these stories I was hearing, though, was that the scams are very different. And so where I thought we would start is by maybe asking the two of you to tell us and explain to the group, what are the types of scams you're seeing? What is most prevalent? And what is top of mind for both of you in your roles? Brittany, maybe we can start with you.
Sure. And as you mentioned, scams are not new to crypto. They've been around for ages across all currencies. And some of the most common involve investment scams, romance scams, phishing, tech support impersonation, where they'll impersonate a different company's tech support, CEO impersonation, as we just saw in the video. Those are usually associated with some sort of a giveaway scam, and even crypto recovery scams, where the victim ends up losing all of their funds to a scammer, and then the scammer goes away, reprises themselves with a new name, a new company, and will claim that they'll help to recover that lost crypto for a fee. So I'll talk a little bit about some of the most common ones that we see within our industry as well as the financial industry. The first one being investment scams. Those come in a lot of shapes and sizes. Typically, what happens is the scammer will approach a victim on a social media website or a messaging app and show off their luxurious lifestyle, tell them how great they've done in crypto investing, and eventually spend enough time with their target to convince them that they can also become a great crypto investor if they just work with them in their investment club. Then the scammer will push them to open up an exchange account on one of the reputable exchanges, and the victim will then deposit fiat funds, purchase crypto, and end up withdrawing those to the scammer's wallets. And some of the other types of scams that we see are playing on people's sense of fear or urgency. So for example, a scammer may impersonate a government agency, such as the IRS, and claim that that individual owes the IRS thousands of dollars in back pay, and if they don't pay it, their house will be repossessed or they'll serve jail time, thus scaring the individual. And then typically in those cases, the scammer will provide a wallet that the individual can then transfer crypto to. In some of the other fear-based or fear-driven types of scams, we'll see tech support scams where the scammer will pretend to be from a specific tech company or exchange and tell the individual that there is unauthorized activity on their account. These are typically in a phishing email form or an SMS text message form, telling them that there is a login from a random country or city that is unknown to the individual. There's usually a call to action to the individual to either call at a phone number to the scammer, go to a new website, or email them so that they can make contact with the scammer, and from there the scammer will obtain the user's credentials, obtain their 2FA authenticator codes, and can then go into their exchange accounts and withdraw crypto from there. And then lastly, the most commonly known scam is the romance scam, where the scammer will approach and initiate contact, typically on a dating app website, and will build a relationship with an individual, particularly those who are susceptible, sometimes elder, sometimes those who are quite lonely, and they'll dedicate days, weeks, months into courting and creating a relationship with this individual. Eventually, they will tell them that they need funds either for a house so that they can live together eventually, or for airfare or visas or a family emergency. And the individual will be pushed to open up an account on a reputable exchange, purchase the crypto, and eventually send it to the scammer. This can go on for months, years, depending on the situation, until the individual has no funds left, and the scammer will eventually disappear, leaving the individual devastated, heartbroken, and of course at a loss of funds.
Wow, that's terrible.
It really is.
Terrible. Philip, anything that you would add there?
You know, I think that's a great overview of the current sort of types of scams in the market. I think the important thing that I would add to that is that the scams are as old as time, right? I'm pretty sure that 5 seconds after the first piece of money changed hands, the first scam occurred, would be my guess. And the scams, while they differ in detail over time, they don't differ in substance, right? A confidence scam is a confidence scam is a confidence scam, no matter how it's executed. A romance scam is a romance scam, no matter if it's, you know, we call it pig butchering today because of the specific characteristics or what have you. And no matter, you know, what we do today as a platform, as an industry, really as even a community, scams aren't going anywhere, right? They're going to change form, they're going to update, they're going to find a new level, and they're going to continue on unabated, unfortunately. So this work is both critical and honestly never ends.
You use the term pig butchering, which is a term I heard recently when I was preparing for this panel. Can you share with the audience, you know, very briefly, what that is?
Sure. So pig butchering is a type of romance scam. It's distinguished by, number one, first of all, the length of the scam. They can go on for months. They can go on for many months, even years, depending on the victim and the specific setup. But just as Brittany described, it's focused on outreach initially perhaps on social media, a dating app, what have you, that then takes a conversation to normally an end-to-end encrypted messenger that then convinces over time, after a relationship has been established, it's normally something like, oh hey, I know you're having money difficulties, I've had great success with this crypto investment technique, let me teach you about it, or something of that nature. It tends to be very specific to the individual situation of the victim because of the amount of time that's spent in the relationship building stage.
And another thing we've talked about is that sometimes the scammers are actually being scammed themselves. They are also occasionally victims.
They are.
Would you one of you like to speak to that?
Sure. We're aware, and this is in media, so definitely encourage you all to find some articles around this, but there are organized crime groups out of different parts of the world. Particularly the most famous is out of Southeast Asia, that are typically run by Chinese organized groups, where they have basically forced labor and trafficked victims into these compounds to scam. And they are not allowed to leave. They're usually working under duress. They have to hit certain quotas, or they might be tortured or worse. And so they are there to just scam. They've got a lot of resources. It's a massive network that they've built. And they hit global citizens from China to Australia to North America.
And, what's interesting now is that we're starting to see AI come into use more and more in these same, for lack of a better word, scam farms, to both speed the process up and to decrease their reliance on unreliable humans.
Yeah, and thank you for sort of laying the groundwork for the types of scams that you both are seeing. We started this panel with a video of Brad on screen, including in his maybe pajamas. And the reason we put that video together, why Ripple put that video together, is a different kind of scam than we've heard about, which is on different social media platforms, scammers using Ripple's trademark or even Brad's likeness to say, hey, if you send Ripple 1,000 XRP, we will send you 10,000 back. And unfortunately, people fall for this more often than we would like, so frequently, in fact, that we felt the need to put together a video to say, we will never ask for your XRP. Please do not send it to us. You are being scammed. So we've talked about scams and what they look like. It's obviously a very lucrative business. What happens to a person, if you can speak to this, if they do get scammed? Brittany, maybe I'll start with you.
Yeah, there's some recourse for individuals who have been scammed. Report. I can't stress this enough, but they have to report it. The FBI ic3.gov will take all reports. It's simple, it's easy, it's online. They can report there. I also recommend reporting to your local law enforcement, who may have resources as well for the individual. And then they really need to come to the different tech companies and exchanges that they've experienced the scam on and report there as well for their own internal knowledge and data.
Yeah, and Philip, so let's assume someone's been, scammed. They take the steps Brittany's just described. Can you give a rough sense of likelihood of recovery in the crypto world?
I mean, it varies so drastically. It depends on how quickly people report. It depends on where the assets go after the scam occurs. And so recovery does happen, but with criminals that have really honed their craft, they can make it much, much, much harder for either us as an exchange community, or even for law enforcement to effect a recovery, unfortunately.
And how does, if at all, part of the benefit of crypto is speed of transactions. There's anonymity in the on-chain wallets. Have you seen that impact chances at recovery? I
mean, the thing that impacts recovery the most is the finality of transactions at the end of the day, right? The fact that, especially if funds are going to a non-custodial wallet, those cannot be in the same way perhaps a wire transfer could not be clawed back after the fact. On the other hand, the benefit of this is, on that public blockchain, the fact of those scams is forever and indelibly written. And so if you're in a position where you're investigating these scams, you have so much more information available to you, both individually on an individual transaction and in an aggregate basis, that it's much easier, number one, to characterize the prevalence of a given group or a scam, which is great for law enforcement, because the more assets are involved in investigation, the more the law enforcement is going to pursue that investigation. But it's also great because you gave a stat at the very, very beginning here, about 0.5%. It's great because that stat has some factual basis to it, right? We can go and look at the volume of transactions, where they're going. We can make some assumptions about, is this address illicit or is it not, what have you. Try doing that with the US dollar economy. Unless you're making very, very significant assumptions, you will have a hard time getting to a data-backed percentage of illicit activity.
That's really interesting. I hadn't thought of it in terms of the benefits of blockchain in terms of tracking scams. I mean, I think we could all agree that it would be better if these scams didn't happen in the first place.
Absolutely.
I'm a litigator by background. I am very much in a reactive posture most of the time. So something bad happens, I step in. And while I was thinking about this panel and my experience with Ripple's, either the scams that Ripple has experienced, as I talked about earlier, what struck me is that being in a reactive position, and this is not rocket science, it's not as strong a position to be in. The chances of recovery are so much lower. How do we get into a proactive posture? How can we get ahead of these scams, knowing that scammers are smart, they're agile. If you're hip to them, they may quickly change some things to get ahead of whatever monitoring in place you've put in. So Brittany, I'm curious if you could maybe kick it off with letting us know, like, what are some proactive steps the industry is taking to try and get ahead of these scams?
Yeah, the number one main way to combat scams is education for customers, users, friends, family, really understanding when to know when they're being scammed, to take a pause, talk to somebody about who's reached out to them, verify legitimacy, and really question what's going on. Internally, within the industry, communication amongst the different platforms, as I mentioned before, scammers move from social media to messaging apps to exchanges, and really bringing those industries together to be able to talk through the different points within a scam that they're seeing is really helpful.
Yeah, Philip, anything you would add there that Brittany hasn't touched on ways that the industry is learning from these scams or getting ahead, taking steps to get ahead and shut them down?
Yeah, so two things. Number one, I cannot underline strongly enough how much of an impact it has to get education out to potential victims. We at Coinbase put a video out specifically on pig butchering relatively recently, and we allowed specific victims to tell their stories anonymously through animation and voice actors, but it was the actual stories of two victims. And what we've found through that and other efforts we've taken internally is that there is nothing as powerful as a victim telling their story to other potential victims. Nothing resonates with them like that, nothing sticks with them like that, nothing is as effective as getting those voices out there. The hard thing about that is the people who need to hear those voices are not the people who are reading Coinbase's blog. They are not the people that I bet are reading Gemini's blog or Ripple's blog. There are the people that I bet every single person here knows, somebody, who when they think a person who's financially at risk, you think of a person, a parent, an uncle, an aunt, a friend, a colleague, a coworker. And so one call to action I would give to every single one of you is when you think of that person, ask yourself, have I done anything to educate them? Who is the first person they're going to hear from when they think about scams? A scammer or a friend? And I would so strongly encourage you for it to be a friend first. The second thing I'll say is, while scams and scammers evolve continuously, that doesn't mean that platforms don't and shouldn't be monitoring those efforts, be building controls, be building detections to say, hey, this looks like a scam pattern that is currently in vogue, right? And we at Coinbase, of course, do that work as well as most of the industry. The other important thing there is sharing, right? The things that I see are not the things that Brittany sees. The things that she sees are not. There's obviously overlap, right? But if I can tell her and she can tell me, hey, I'm seeing this, you might not have yet, that tightens my decision loop, right? That makes me a little bit faster, which maybe that protects one more consumer, 2 more consumers, 10 more consumers, hopefully even more than that. But that kind of sharing leading to durable detections makes scammers' lives harder. And at the end of the day, that's what this all is all about, is making scammers' lives harder.
Yeah, thank you. We were talking about the importance of education as we were preparing for this panel, and what we said is, one of the things we talked about was, it's not just educating a time, or to Philip's point, on the Coinbase platform or the Gemini platform or the Ripple website. It's talking about it more regularly, reaching out to all of your customers regularly, your friends, your family. I'm now thinking I should call my parents. And the reason why is because the scams are effective because they prey on your psychology, is what Brittany, you and I were talking about, right? It's fear-based scams. You feel, they're smart and they tap into something. And so if you happen to get some education on that type of scam around the time you're approached, you're more likely to remember that than if you got that email about it, 18 months ago and have completely forgotten about it as you've moved on with your life. Okay, so we've talked about scams, we've talked about challenge of recovery, we've talked about things, the industry's doing. We talked about, or you guys talked about how these scams aren't just within the crypto industry, right? This is an issue broader than crypto. Certainly, if each company is working in their own silo, they're going to be less effective. Can you talk about way industry can come together and has come together? And maybe I'll start by prefacing by saying all Ripple, Coinbase, and Gemini, among many others, recently joined a coalition, Tech Against Scams. So Philip, maybe you could kick off telling the audience what that is and what the goals of that coalition are.
Absolutely. So Tech Against Scams is sort of what it says on the box. It is a group of technology organizations who have come together and realized that scams in this day and age are not a single platform problem. We talked about this with pig butchering and romance scams, where we talked about maybe it starts on a dating app, maybe it goes to a messenger, maybe it goes to a financial institution. There can be, a lot of other variations to that. But if you break that down and ask, well, what does that dating app see? That dating app sees a match, a short conversation, a move to something else. What does that messenger see? It depends on the messenger and their encryption practices, but most of them are going to see two people in that have connected and are having a conversation. What does that financial institution see? Well, that they see a KYC'd user who comes in and wants to buy or sell or transfer on that platform. And so only really by taking a step back and asking, what does this whole path look like, can we start to really figure out the things that are the places we can intervene with those users, whether it be on that dating app at the beginning, whether it be at the end on the financial platform, somewhere in the middle. Who knows? It depends on how that scam is evolving. But that kind of coordination, cooperation is absolutely critical to making sure that we not only can take countermeasures today, but to your point, scammers are not dumb. You have to think of an adversary as at least as smart as you, probably smarter. They will absolutely start to evolve their approach. And the fact that we have a coalition put together means that we can communicate very efficiently and effectively with each other about how we see these approaches evolving so that we can get, again, a tighter decision loop ahead of the attackers, not behind them.
Brittany, I'm interested to hear why Gemini decided to lean into this coalition and, why you think the industry cooperation, and industry, not just crypto industry, but tech industry, is similar here, if you have anything else to add.
Sure, yeah, Gemini thinks that scams are really paramount to eroding trust within the crypto industry in general. So we were more than happy to join. As I mentioned before, it can be really tricky to understand the genesis of a scam, particularly because it happens off of our exchange when the initiation occurs. And so we only get a small piece of the puzzle towards the end when the crypto is being moved. And so being able to speak with other industries, with the dating apps and social media really helps us build that full picture and information share so that we can all be better at detection.
That's great. I know that the coalition is new. It launched in spring of this year, I believe.
Correct, yes.
So big, lofty goals, really excited to see what comes of that. In both of your roles, are there other gaps that you think still need to be filled in combating scams in this space?
Always, yes, right? Scammers always evolve. They look for the gaps. They look for the holes in data sharing, places that their effort becomes more durable and gives them more return on their investment, right? So we will always find them. We will always fill them. I think we need to continue to push data sharing writ large. The scammers are absolutely sharing data in forums all the time. They're actually quite chatty. And we need to be able to be that chatty as well. Now, part of this is constructs like Tech Against Scams, Crypto ISAC, FS ISAC for crypto companies that are financial institutions as well, and others. But part of this is also making sure that we throw the net wide enough, that we get as many players as possible in the room, so that we can get ahead of the bad guys as they're evolving their tactics.
Brittany, anything you want to add to that? Gaps to be filled?
Philip said it all. Really, that customer education, working together across the greater tech industry, and I would include financial institutions as well who are banking some of the individuals, and include them in our coalition. And really understanding the data, sharing the data, because scams move so quickly, being quick to share the data is really key, because a scam that happened last month may not be as relevant as a scam that happens today.
Okay, we're almost out of time, but I wanted to end with maybe a call to action. So we have a room full of leaders in financial services, regulators, entrepreneurs. If there was one thing that you could ask this group of leaders in terms of assisting in combating scams, what would it be? Or it could be more than one.
I'll go first.
Sure, please.
So I'm going to say two things. One thing to you all as an audience of leaders in the crypto economy, the ecosystem, regulation thereof. One thing to you is just people. So as leaders, the most important thing, and I hate to sound like a broken record here, but we cannot be scared to talk about scams. Right? This cannot be something that we say, oh, we don't want to talk about that because that might bring too much attention to it. Bringing attention to it is what makes it go away. Right? The cure is sunlight for these things. So as leaders, leaders in the industry, leaders of companies, founders, if you're in a place where a scam touches your platform, join Tech Against Scams, join the coalition, have a conversation there. Be willing to have a conversation publicly, right? Use it. I think the video that Ripple put together is amazing, right? Focus on where your customers are encountering scammers, and ask yourself, what can I do to make sure that when they encounter those scammers, going back to this isn't the first time they've heard of this scam when a scammer runs it on them. Right? The second thing is people. Scams carry with them a lot of shame, right? Victims, time and time again, when we talk to victims, one of the core emotions they feel once they get out of the scam is shame. They don't want to talk about it. And this is frequently why they don't engage with their friends and their family out there, right? So I've shared a little bit about, share the video, reach out. I'll give you one more thing. Frequently, we hear from relatives of scams that they know that their relative is being scammed, or they believe their relative is being scammed, but they can't talk about it, or the relative isn't willing to engage, or what have you. If you encounter this, or you encounter someone who's encountering this, here's a very simple trick. Say, look, Uncle Bob, I think you're involved in a scam. I know we don't want to talk about it, and that's fine. So here's what I want you to do. I want you, tomorrow morning, next week, whenever it is, but I want you to sit down with a rubber ducky right in front of you. And I want you to explain to that rubber ducky exactly what it is you're doing. In detail. Tell them the whole thing. And if you think that rubber ducky is judging you, if you think that rubber ducky thinks this is a terrible idea, give me a call and let's talk about it. And if not, that's great. You're an adult and I trust your judgment. Right? That gives that person, the most important thing this gives someone who might be a victim of a scam is a way to take a step back from being involved in that scam and to, in a no-guilt way, explain what's going on. So I'll leave you with those two things.
Thank you. I hadn't heard the rubber ducky thing before. That's really interesting. I'll take that back. Brittany, how about you?
I second everything Philip just said. educating users, customers, family members, friends is really the best way to approach this. At the end of the day, we really want to empower our customers to interact with the crypto ecosystem in a safe and secure way.
Great. Well, thank you both for your time. We hope you found that interesting and informative, and you have your call to action. Thank you.